Hello, this is David Alfred Ostrowski, and in this recording, I'm going to be giving you a complete blockchain hello world demonstration utilizing Solidity React.js on an Amazon EC2 instance. I'll be starting completely from scratch, going through all the installations with the installation setup of React. The initial smart contract, we're going to do a very simple smart contract. I'm going to read to the blockchain and write from the blockchain a simple hello world style string. And I'm going to do it from start to finish, 0 to 100. So if you want to even step in lighter to this problem and engage directly with the Solidity smart contract without React, I have another version of this video, which is an even better starting point from 0, called the Solidity Hello World AWS EC2 demo from 0. So you might want to take a look at that because it is a great starting point and stepping stone into this. And it can also get you in the habit of leveraging the JavaScript console to script out Solidity. It's a nice and interesting way to perform extra testing, assertion testing, and just becoming more familiar, engaging with that smart contract. So the more ways that you can hit that smart contract, just the better off you're going to be, stronger you're going to be with your development and testing skills, and which is super important in the context of blockchain. So let's get started. I'm going to only assume that you have an AWS account, and we're going to start from there. So here I'm at the EC2 instance screen. And again, I'm starting from absolutely nothing. So let's say you don't even know how to go to EC2 instance. If I go to smiley face, get my console home, it would show up under recently visited for me. If you haven't gone there, you can just type in EC2 and it'll easily direct you to the EC2 instances. I'm going to click on instances and I'm going to fire up an instance. Now, if you run React alone, if you're a full stack developer, to be honest, you might get away with a T2 instance. That's not going to be the case. With blockchain development, you're going to need a little more horsepower. We're going to be using the Ganache personal blockchain in this case, and the Truffle framework for the engagement with your blockchain. So I'm going to use a c.5 large instance that I have here, and I'm going to start it up from scratch here. So I'm going to do a launch instance. As with a lot of my examples, I use Ubuntu. It's quite simply the most documented version of Linux available. So I'm going to default everything, and except for the instance type again. Most unfortunately, I need to go for a little more power. I've tried lower instances, and I don't know the exact sweet spot, but C5 large always gets me through. I'm going to be using this as a sandbox, and I'm going to terminate everything when I'm done. So one thing I would encourage you, if you're using it in the same fashion that I do, by all means, delete your instances. Do not just, terminate them. Minimally stop them, okay? Because if you leave them up and running, you'll incur charges. So you've been warned, right? Be very careful with the Amazon billing. It can catch up on you, and you can wind up with a much larger bill or burn through your free time a lot faster than perhaps you anticipated. So I'm assuming you know how to generate a PPK key. This allows for the security for the access. If you don't, you can click to the left and you have a PPK key generation process. It's not that difficult. Okay, so I have one generated already, and I'm going to use that. And as far as in regions, I stay in the Oregon region. There's no magical region or sweet spot as far as the regions. One thing I'd encourage you, be consistent. Don't work in multiple regions. It's too confusing, and it's too confusing to keep an eye on your billing. That's it. I'm going to default everything else. I'm going to launch that instance and we can get started on our installation. It's not going to take long. Okay. And one thing I want to point out, all my commands, everything that I'm doing, all my steps are going to be associated in the GitHub associated with this video. Okay. So the beauty of working in this framework, unlike all the examples, nearly everything that I find with books or YouTube is that the compatibility is not exactly the same. So we do it on an instance, I can present content, you can run it exactly the same fashion that I am in most cases, if not all. Okay, the only thing that's going to kill you is perhaps something gets updated in the cloud and it breaks it. Okay, but if you run this recently to it's been as it has been recorded, in most cases it's going to work. So one extra thing I'm going to do ahead of time, I'm going to look at security. I'm going to want to access my website. So I'm going to touch my security rules and I'm going to modify my inbound rules, which the default is quite naturally going to be set up to restrict access to only secure shell input. I'm going to edit my inbound rules and I'm going to shotgun it. I'm going to add it to change it to all traffic here and IP4. That is going to allow me to access the React application directly from my from a DNS, and I won't get a 404 or some type of restrictive error here. So I save the rules. Now I'm good to go. If you don't do that, then you're going to have trouble seeing your React application through a browser. Okay, so it's up and running. And let me scroll this up a little bit and go into details. And I have a IP address. I use Putty as a client. Use any type of client that you're comfortable with. Putty's tried and true. It's been around forever and a day. I'm going to bring up a couple terminals. One is going to be to run my Ganache personal blockchain, and the other to do the editing and set up the application and instantiate the application as well. So here's my first terminal. When I bring up Ubuntu as usual, prompts me for a generalized username, password. The username is Ubuntu. I don't have a password set up here, so I'm in to my instance right here. Let me grab my IP again, and I'm going to run a second terminal. So I have it all set up, so I'm going to be good to go here. So I won't have to do it again. There we go. I got two terminals up and running. Now I can start doing my installs. So you can install in their project directory. I'm going to install everything and it brings you into it. It lands you at home Ubuntu. Okay, so I'm going to do my installations and then do a create React app. It's going to give me a bare bones framework of which I'm going to do some slight modifications to enable it to talk to a backend blockchain. Okay, so, but I'm going to run all my installations out of home Ubuntu. You want to duplicate exactly what I'm doing, that's a good place to start. If you set up a separate project directory over and above this, then at least the very least, I'd encourage you to be consistent. Okay, so again, I'm going to cut paste these commands here, talk to them briefly. This is the necessary software. And I'm going to just run through that, not going to spend a lot of time here, and it's going to set up pretty quickly. So here, first thing I do is a sudo apt get update. This is a preliminary software that you typically have to run to bring down sudo-based utilities. I'm going to copy down a version of Node, and I'm going to use the setup 14x. I'm using a curl command. It's going to pull it down from the cloud, and this is compatible with all the other software. Okay, so now I'm going to execute that setup file that was brought down in the last command. So that sets up Node. And now I'm going to do an install Node.js and build essential libraries. Again, if you're interested in a little more detail on these, you can dig into that, but let's get this up and running and say hello world, and then you can play and have fun and dig in deeper to the issues here. Okay. So in most cases, whoops, it's prompting me, right? So I'm going to default everything. And anytime it's prompted, unless I indicate otherwise, you just default it as yes. Try to specify versions in most, if not all cases. That is going to eliminate something breaking as long as I'm using the same version of Ubuntu in most cases. So I'm going to pull in Webpack 3.00 and the Webpack CLI. So this is the necessary browser-based support for working with React. And in most cases, you're going to be downloading, if you do full stack, you're going to be downloading similar libraries. Next, I'm going to pull in the personal blockchain, Ganache CLI. And I've been experimenting with Hardhat, so I may present that in future content as well. I got that up and running in EC2. Pull an additional library, node GUIP. And just a few more. I'm going to pull in the Truffle environment. And the Web3 library and Solidity compiler. Not using the latest and greatest in Solidity, but again, this is a great starting point, something that you can just get up and running, and you can experiment with newer versions. Final install is the Create React app. So we're almost home here. So future videos, I'm going to be relying on this. So this is a good starting point because I'm not going to go through all the installs from zero in every video that's expanding on these details. So now I'm going to call Create React app. I'm going to call my React just hello for hello world, right? I'm going to run it right out of this directory. This is going to create a directory and associated subdirectories for basically React development. And then I'm going to perform the truffle in it. Inside of that, it's going to give me a little more framework to do the blockchain. And then I'm going to do some slight modifications and get it up and running. We're going to be good to go. So this is Create React app now. I'm going to have everything on GitHub, including this whole framework that's been generated as the way I am presenting it to you. You might be inclined to do a clone, but the clone may not set up all the appropriate software. So I would really encourage you to install it in the same fashion that I've done, because your node modules may not be completely 100% functional. Okay, so, and it's always good to have that install and the knowledge of exactly how I got to that framework, because as you well know, things are going to change over time. So to have some familiarity and stepping into that, when you expand and work on more complicated examples, it's going to be good practice, okay, to learn. So now I'm going to, this is most important, I'm going to step into that project directory. I can see I have node modules. I have some basic files set up just for full stack development. Okay, now I do the truffle, and that's going to give me the framework that is amenable for the integration with my backend data source, my Ganache personal blockchain that I'm going to be running on my C.5 instance. So that's what I'm doing right now, truffle in it, and that sets it up. So now I'm good to go. So let's look at what it generated here. I have a number of directories on migrations, contracts, public, and the source was there already, right? So most importantly, migrations to contracts. Let's load in my smart contract. I can talk to that. Let's see to the contracts right now. And here I have a migrations contract that's provided, and we're not going to be changing that, but let's just take a quick look at it. This is pretty much the way that I'm going to be managing my smart contracts, even more detailed examples, but take note of it. And again, as I put more detailed examples, we can step through this and get a greater appreciation of exactly what's going on with that migration. I'm going to create a new file, hello SOL. So this is the same contract that we use interpretively. Now we're just pulling it into the Truffle environment. Again, as I mentioned, if you haven't seen my last video and you're just stepping into this, that's a great starting point. It's not going to take you a lot longer, much longer to go through that, and it's going to give you a great background. So here I have the smart contract. I'm running, again, slightly an antiquated version of Solidity, but I know that it works. Okay, 0.5.16. All this is on the GitHub. Okay, so don't have to worry about getting every detail from this recording alone. On the contract hello, and I have a string called stored data, an event called my event test. This is going to be generated, and I have a setGet function. Okay. Very intuitively, I am reading in a string called my test. I'm going to associate it to stored data and emit an event, the my test event. And then I'm going to have a get reference here, public view. It's going to return that string. So I'm just going to read and write a string to the blockchain. That's it. But this is a great starting point, right, for integrating your whole React front end. Obviously, we're not going to run applications from command line. So this is a great starting point for a lot more detailed examples that I'll be presenting. Okay, so let's leave that for the moment and go back to our checklist here and just continue on here. So we're almost there. We're almost up and running. Just a few more extra things that we have to do. Next, I want to edit the Truffle config file that was generated for me. So let's go back to my project directory, and I'm going to go to truffle.config. So this file's huge. Okay, you might want to copy it off and study it, okay, because it'll serve you well moving forward as you do more expansive development. Right now, I'm going to copy in a condensed version that I use specifically that I know works, okay, and this is giving me the bare minimum. And right now, that's what we want. We just want to get up and running and feel good about it, right, and see it work. And then we have a starting point to work into incrementally into more detailed examples. Okay, so here I just copy this in, and here I have a migrations directory, and I have a development host, 8545 is port. I need to load the specific DNS because I'm not running, not going to know what localhost is. Okay, you might see localhost in other examples. I have to be explicit with my DNS, so I have to change this. And keep that in mind. If you left this up and running, or you have a version of this and you shut down and start up, your DNS is going to be reassigned. So make sure that you are changing that. Otherwise, it's not going to read appropriately. So I updated to the DNS, and now I'm good to go. Okay, so that part's done. And again, all these steps, everything I'm going through is in the README file on the GitHub that's associated with this. So take a look at that, and it should, 30 minutes from 0 to 100, you should be up and running and saying hello world with a full DAPP, not just running a smart contract, but a full decentralized application up and running. So let's fire up the blockchain, okay? And how I do that, I have the command here, buffered, and I have to be explicit with my DNS. So I have a copy of that here, but I have an old DNS, so I'm going to have to change that. And this is invoking Ganache CLI port 8545 standard port, standard chain ID 5777. And let me grab the DNS, go off screen a little bit, pull it back, and I'm going to add it to this. Let's kind of buffer up my command. I can cut and paste that, and I can fire up my Ganache It's a blockchain. I'm going to be running it directly on the instance and running my, if you will, an n-tiered application. I'm going to be running it completely on my self-contained machine here, right? My Amazon EC2 instance, my little sandbox. So I backed out of the home directory. That's important. If you run it out of hello, it's not gonna, I don't have all the paths, the home Ubuntu specified. So here it should start up my blockchain. You can see right here. Take a look at this. Okay, so it's listening. It started up my server. I have accounts and private keys. I got 10 accounts with 100 ETH respectively, and my mnemonics, gas price limit, and so forth. Here, I'm not worried about wallets, or we'll add that at later examples and demonstrations. But here, just want to read and write to the blockchain. Okay, and we have our blockchain up and running. So let's leave this up here, and we can monitor that, and that's going to serve as a means of validating exactly what's going on. So I'm going to push my lower screen down here. I kind of leave it at 20 font. That way it's a little bit easier to read. Okay, so I have a couple more things. So the next step I want to do is deploy my contract to the blockchain, right? So I have to modify my deployment script before I do that. So where is that? Let me go back to hello. And I'm going to go to migrations. And if you see here, I have initial migration. And that's, again, a very simplified starting point. I need a separate migration file to get this smart contract up and running. And I'm going to have to call it to_deploy contracts. And again, everything is in my GitHub. So let me call to_deploy. I got to name it appropriately or it just won't work, right? So I'm using the VI editor, tried and true, use whatever editor you're comfortable with, right? So this is going to be careful with the cases, hello.solidity with uppercase H. And I'm going to deploy that hello to the smart contract. And that's essentially all that I'm going to do, right? So that's set up. Now I can do my deployment. I have my blockchain up and running. I have to deploy my smart contract to the blockchain to be able to read it. So, and it doesn't matter where I have this fully specified home Ubuntu, node modules, bin, truffle, deploy. So let's run the deployment, see if it works. The blockchain is in the upper left. You can see that running, and you can see the blocks that have been written, and I didn't get any errors. Gas usage, block number, the transaction numbers. Also here, I have a specification. I had the first migration ran, and that's to support the transaction. It's had the charge of the ETH. This is to the default account that's associated with the application. And then I have the deployment of my hello smart contract. Okay, so I got my blockchain up and running. I have initialized my environment. I've deployed my smart contract. It's residing there. Let's test my application, just React. And then I'm going to modify it as my front end for my React Hello World application. So I can back out here. I could just do npm start and create React app gives me a bare bones Hello World that just does nothing more, right? This is complaining a little bit on some of the imports. It's still working. Okay, so moving forward, if it breaks, I'll try to fix it. And that's the beauty of it, right? I can find a problem, I can hopefully fix it and publish any type of solutions. That way we can get these examples up and running faster, which is so challenging in this fast moving environment, right? So let me grab the DNS. Now React runs at port 3000. So I'm going to pull my DNS in my browser, and remember to make sure you've added those inbound rules. Otherwise, it's not going to be able to touch it. So let's see if it works. Let's see if I can just access React. And this is for those of you full stack advocates, right? This is what it shows up to basically say hello world from React, but we want to say hello DAPP. Okay, so, but this is a nice way to step into our problem. Okay, so we have a problem with React. The DAPP is not going to be working. So let me back out and let's go to our app. And I have the code already here. We're going to edit it, put it in there, and then we're going to run the example start to finish. One thing I need to do before I modify the source code is I have to pull in the contract definition, because my source code is going to be reading. It needs a contract ID. Now, I can't easily read it from the build directory. I have to physically copy it over. In the future, I'm going to have a build kit set up where it's going to copy over the files, but I have to do manual copy. And it's kind of nice to still be doing it manually, at least initially, so you know where everything goes. Because if something breaks and everything's done for you, you don't have the complete insight of, gee, what did I miss? If it's a simple thing. So we'll set up your checklist. And again, I have a list of all the steps I went through on the README install associated GitHub. So should be working appropriately, but let's go to build contracts. And this is the JSON definition. And we spoke to this a little bit in the last video. So take a look at that. There's a value to that, right? But I need this contract address. So for this reason, I'm going to just do a copy. I'm just going to shotgun it. I'm going to bump it up a few directories instead of playing around with the directories. And I'm going to put in the source. So per full stack, right? You can't read from everywhere. That's inherent in the nature of web applications to restrict access. Okay, so for this reason, I have to copy in the JSON into my source, and then I'm going to read it directly in there, and I could hard code it into the program. That's messy. Okay, so I read it in as a file and parse that file, pull it out, put it into my code. So I'm going to copy that JSON in the source. Now I'm good to go. Okay, so again, all these are in the directions. Okay, so now what's left is to modify my source code, right? Whoops. Go to source, the app.js. And here, we got 25 lines of code. So we could just blow that away. That is standard. The standard creation would create React app. Okay. And again, it may be tempting just to clone my directory out. I think you can't completely get away with it. You most likely would have to still do the npm installs and the complete installs. It's not going to give you all the system. But let's pull this in, get it up and running, and feel good about ourselves, right? So I pulled it in off my GitHub. Let's just take a look at that code. I got to do one thing. I got to modify my DNS. And again, if you're going to be in and out like I do with GitHub, and I try to outline the steps here directly in the code, a couple different places, right? So you have that reference, have that checklist. Gee, what did I miss? If you, period of time goes by, and it's very easy to forget something. I forgot the deployment, and you're sitting there scratching your head, why isn't this working, right? So for that reason, it's always a good practice to put together that little cheat sheet. Okay, I have the DNS. Everything should be good to go. Let's step through the code, then run it, see if it works, and go through that. So we can dig a little bit deeper, but again, 0 to 100 and get you up and running. And then we can continually dig through this code with further examples and really dig into the insight here. So I import React Web 3 library, not surprisingly, logo. That's somewhat inconsequential. On the app, it extends component. Okay, now the component has specific properties. First thing on the component will mount. This is kind of behind the scenes. Before anything else, it's going to do the initialization of that component will mount. That very conveniently, I'm going to call in this process async load blockchain data. Not surprisingly, it's going to load in the connection to my blockchain. This is super important, right? Here I rely on the Web3 library, and I'm going to connect to my Ganache personal blockchain, right? And I have the DNS here, 8545, and you see it up and running in another terminal. Okay, I'm going to grab the accounts, and I'm going to read that first account. So by doing this, I don't have to worry about the wallets. It's all hard-coded in there. I have another series of videos, so we're going to tear down all the leveraging of wallets and how they are correctly integrated. Okay, but for now, let's get our example up and running. A full complete DAPP. Okay, I have a Web3 library. It's going to grab that network ID. Super convenient. Okay, I'm going to set that state. Now set state with the account. This allows me the functional equivalent of global access. This gives me a real convenient means of having an associated array hash function of account. It's being referenced to accounts. Getting more detailed examples. This is super powerful to give me more access to the state. I do a lot of console logs here, and we can dig a little bit deeper into that. So here I read in that JSON data. That's a file I copied over. I couldn't read it directly from build contracts. It won't allow this program to do that. So I had to do that physical copy. I'm going to automate that moving forward. But again, at this point, it's still kind of comforting to go through that process. Again, you don't want to have everything abstracted too much, because when things break and it's not being copied over, at least you know exactly where you got it from. Here I pull in the network key. It's interesting with the objects. It's all JSON data, so I can hash directly into the objects. And I could do similar nature with the network ID. So you can go, I kind of bounce through both approaches because it's interesting. I can use Web3 libraries and methods, or I can hash directly into JSON. That's the power using JSON, right? I can really read into that. So here I have the JSON data ABI. That's that contract information, and the address that I pull in from that, I hash that out from networks, network ID address. So take a look at the ABI, take a look at JSON data, how I hash that out, and you'll get a good idea of pulling that in. I've seen examples where they actually hard code, cut and paste that contract data in there, and that is a lot more cumbersome, right, than just reading the entire file and parsing it. So that's what I'm doing here. And in the constructor, that's called early, and that is going to just initialize this variable. And then this and state, this gives me that global means of access, right? And I have the account and a loading message and the associated message. Then I have a handler set up. And this is going to support the set method. And if you note here, I have this state, that's the global access. And then I'm referencing contract. That's my contract. Okay, my hello.solidity. And then I need, in this case, to, and I've seen other examples that don't leverage this, but I need in this implementation, I need to have methods before I call that set method, if you recall from the smart contract. And correspondingly, I have a method where I call the get. And I call, when I do the get, I do a set state here, and that updates message, which is displayed to the screen. And then I have render here. This is my HTML reference here. So kind of going this very fast, but I'd encourage you, if you get up and running, take the time to digest everything and make sure that it makes sense, right, before you move forward. Then I have a form set up on the submit that I can submit the text, and that's associated with a button. And on the get contract, that's associated with a get current value where I have the button to retrieve the output. So let's fire it up, see if it works here, right? So I can back out I might be able to run it in source, but I just have a tendency of running out of the base directory. Do an npm start. And I get hot loading with React. So it's complaining a little bit here, but it's still running. Okay, so we'll keep an eye on that moving forward. So can't get too worried about warnings because that's the nature of React. It's really a mess, right? There's so many libraries involved here, but it's working properly. So I should be able to refresh this. In most cases, I think I'll be able to do a hot reset. So I had to hit return. Okay, so here the message output, get set. And let's look at our blockchain. Okay, let's kind of keep that down, and I can shrink this and get a better appreciation of what's going on here. And at the very minimal, I can see that scroll by. So I have message output of zeros. I don't have anything written in the smart contract, and I'm going to say hello with a lot of O's. Okay, and I'm going to update that contract. And you can see in the background, it did an update to my contract. Okay. So now I'm going to grab that value, and there you go. That's my message. Let's say hi again and do an update. And then grab that again and it updates. So there you go. I got a full-scale DAPP using React.js as my front end. I'm engaging with a smart contract that has been deployed to the Ganache personal blockchain, right? And using Solidity. So that's it, start to finish. And one thing before I wrap things up is I want to super encourage you, terminate your instance if you're not using this as a production and not going to use Hello World as production anyway. So terminate it. That way, keep your costs to an absolute minimum, set your billing alerts, be careful, okay? Especially c.5, because it's a lot more expensive than your T2 micro and so forth. So that's it, start to finish. We went from zero to a complete DAPP implementation using Solidity EC2 c.5 instance and the ever popular React.js framework, along with Ganache and Truffle. So thanks for listening. I hope this helps. Again, all the information I went through is going to be associated below with the GitHub. Good luck with it. Any issues, feel free to reach out to me. Take care. Talk to you soon. Thank you. Bye now.